I guess I shouldn't have been snooping. I thought I was just being a bit insensitive, invading my wife's privacy. I had the best of intentions. At least that's what I told myself when I found her diaries. I thought if I read a little bit of them, I would learn some secret desire she had. Something that would allow me to get her the perfect 15th anniversary gift. Well, what I found did eventually give me an idea for her anniversary gift. It just took me a while to put it together. It took me quite a while, nearly a full 5 years. I guess I should fill in some of the backstory. Sandy and I, James, were high school sweethearts. We were deeply in love and discovered the physical side of our relationship at an early age. Unfortunately, we were a little slow in learning about contraception, and Sandy got pregnant in the spring of our senior year. Our parents were not happy with us and took us out of town to be married in a very quiet civil service attended by the 4 parents and the 2 of us. Even though we were both 18, if the school had found out, we both would have been expelled, so we hid the pregnancy until graduation. Not the most fantastic beginning for a marriage, but we were excited about the baby. Make that babies, yes, with an S, twins, one of each. Luckily, Sandy's father was able to get me a job on his construction crew, so I was able to modestly provide for my new wife and children. In time, I became a crew leader, which gave us enough money to afford a nice house in a working-class neighborhood. I worked long hours, and Sandy spent all her time caring for our children. We didn't have much time to ourselves. Our social life was limited to kid functions, except for the occasional times our parents took the kids overnight. We had busy lives, but we maintained a reasonably active, intimate life. I took classes during the slower winter months and eventually earned an associate's degree in business management. When the kids entered middle school, I was promoted to a regional manager position. Things got much easier for us financially, and my hours became a little more regular. The only drawback was I had to travel to the home office for some manager meetings. That usually meant I was gone 3 to 4 days every other month. With the kids being older, Sandy decided to get her realtor's license and was hired by Henderson Realty, who listed several of the spec houses we built. They were a large firm, and Sandy did showings for them. She didn't make a lot of money, but she enjoyed the work, even though it meant she often worked odd hours. The summer before the twins were to start their freshman year of high school, Sandy and I were approaching our 15th wedding anniversary. I had been saving money to do something special for her, but just couldn't think of anything special to get her. One Saturday afternoon, the kids were gone, and Sandy had a showing, so I was home alone. I was getting desperate to come up with something special, so I thought I'd look through her closet and jewelry items in the hope of finding inspiration of some sort. I looked at her outfits and just didn't have a clue what she might need or want. Then I decided to check out her jewelry box. What she had was pretty modest, and I thought maybe a nice diamond tennis bracelet would do the trick. As I was putting her jewelry box back into the drawer, it kinda stuck, and I realized there was something in the back of the drawer preventing the box from going back in completely. I dug around and pulled out 3 small books. Each book was nicely bound and had a small flap and lock to secure them. I stared at the books, and it dawned on me that they must be her diaries. I never knew she kept a diary. I had never seen her writing in it, and she had never spoken of them. That should have told me they were very personal, and I shouldn't mess with them. But curiosity had always been one of my weaknesses. And besides, maybe it will give me a great idea for her gift. Yeah, that's the rationalization I used when I cracked open her private diaries and began reading. It appeared she had started them when the kids were about 2, and much of the first 2 books were just recaps of important childhood events, and not much else. The 3rd book was much more recent and talked of her struggles to pass her realtor exam and land a job with Henderson. It went on to talk about how nervous she'd been when she did her first showing, and how grateful she was to have Brad Henderson, the owner's son, help her write her first contract and consummate her first sale. Apparently, she worked a lot with Brad because the next several pages of entries were filled with her activities with him. One particular entry caused me to pause. Sandy had written a detailed description of young Mr. Henderson. From her writings, I learned he was 24, so nearly 10 years younger than me, tall and very well built, with delicious deep blue eyes and a smile that could make a girl weak in the knees. What the heck? I quickly read farther into the book, and my world began to crumble. Checking the dates of her entries, I figured out it took Brad about 6 months to get her into bed, and they were intimate several times over the following year. No doubt their affair would have continued, but Brad's grandfather, who owned several vacation resorts on the West Coast, convinced Brad to move out west and become his understudy. Sandy's entries over the last year often lamented the loss of her delicious guilty pleasure. Well, that revelation certainly ended any plans for making our 15th anniversary special. She got a cheap bouquet of flowers, period, no card, no dinner, and no affection. Reading her diary clearly showed she had been quite smitten with Brad and felt no compunction about cheating on me. I had no doubt she would still be gleefully seeing the jerk if he hadn't left town. Her cavalier attitude about cheating had me wondering if she was currently looking for someone to replace Brad. I focused on being supportive of my kids and let my feelings for the only girl I'd ever love slowly die. My plan was to stay married to the cheating woman until the kids left for college. We live in a no-fault state, so there was little I could do to protect myself from the courts. I dumped most of the money we had saved into a tuition account for the kids, knowing that I would be responsible for that anyway. I also began to slowly collect cash and rare coins and keep them in a safe in a rented, fireproof, climate-controlled storage unit under my brother's name. Periodically, I would check her diaries to see if she had found a new paramour, but there was never any mention of any new, delicious, guilty pleasures. She did describe, in great detail, her desires for a few young men she had encountered, but it appeared she never acted on any of those feelings. Most of her entries were just recaps of her work life and the kids' adventures. As the kids prepared to graduate, she wrote of her hopes to travel with me and finally get to enjoy life with her wonderful, thoughtful, loving husband. She actually wrote those words. I almost became ill. During those 5 years of waiting, I wasn't just saving money and going through the motions. I was formulating a plan that would ensure both Sandy and Brad would understand the full consequences of their actions. First, I hired a private investigator to track down Brad Henderson on the West Coast. It didn't take long to discover he was now the general manager of the Ocean View Resort in Malibu, one of his grandfather's premier properties. The PI also discovered Brad had developed quite a reputation as a womanizer, making passes at both guests and staff. He'd narrowly avoided a couple of sexual harassment lawsuits thanks to his grandfather's influence and money. I needed more than just information, though. I needed leverage. So I created a new identity, Jason Reynolds, a wealthy real estate developer looking to expand into luxury resorts. I had business cards, a website, and even a basic LLC registered in Wyoming. I spent about $10,000 setting everything up, but it would be worth every penny. Next, I cultivated a relationship with Caroline from my office, but not in the way you might think. Caroline was smart, competent, and happened to be lesbian. When I explained my situation and my plan, she agreed to help me with the charade I was planning. She had her own reasons. Her mother had been devastated by a cheating husband, and Caroline had a personal vendetta against men who betrayed their wives. "I'll play your girlfriend," she said, "but just for the revenge. No funny business." "Trust me," I assured her. "This is strictly business." I also reached out to Henderson Realty and casually inquired about Sandy's work history. I learned that Mr. Henderson Sr. had been deeply disappointed in his son's behavior with female employees, which was the real reason Brad had been shuffled off to the West Coast. The old man was traditional and held high ethical standards, unlike his grandson. As the date approached for the twins to leave for college, I put the final pieces in place. I sent several emails to Brad as Jason Reynolds, expressing interest in his resort and floating the idea of a major investment opportunity. He took the bait immediately, suggesting I come for a personal tour and consultation. The day came to drop off the kids at school and return home as official empty nesters. It had been a tough few years, pretending to care about Sandy. I had shed a lot of tears early on, but gradually hardened my heart. Although our intimate life had slowed to a crawl, Sandy was always receptive and sometimes initiated things. Too bad. I really liked being with her, but it was just physical now, never making love. I had Sandy's big SUV packed to the gills and a ton of crap loaded onto the roof. The kids' campus was about 2 hours away, so we all chatted away as I made the drive. We got the kids delivered and set up in their respective dorms and got back into the SUV for the drive home. James, can you believe our babies are off to college? My God, it seems like yesterday I was changing their diapers. Yes, those early years just seem to have flown by. It's great to see them so excited about this next phase in their lives, I replied. Oh, James, I'm pretty excited to begin this next phase in our lives too. Just think about the time we will have to ourselves. I want to travel a little and really enjoy each other, she answered. Well, Sandy, I'm very, very excited to begin this new chapter in life. I am truly looking forward to traveling with my beautiful companion to exotic places. Sandy grinned and leaned over and kissed me on the cheek, and then settled back in her seat and drifted off to sleep. Sandy awoke when I pulled into our garage. Oh my, I must have conked out on you there. I can't believe we're home. Yep, you're home, I said as I got out of the car and opened the rear hatch and reached for my 2 suitcases. Sandy frowned at me and said, Oh goodness, did they forget some of their stuff? Just then, a small SUV pulled into our driveway, and Caroline got out and waved to me before opening the rear hatch of her car. Nope, these are my bags, I said as I hefted the bags and carried them to the other vehicle. I stored the bags and kissed Caroline briefly as Sandy stood gaping at us. Sandy, I'm sure you remember Caroline from my office. She is here to pick me up. We will be back in about 3 weeks, I answered. 3 weeks? James, what the hell are you talking about? You never said anything about any business trips. How can you just spring this on me like this? She asked. Caroline stepped up to Sandy and handed her a large envelope. I said, Those are the divorce papers. I suggest you have an attorney review them. I think I have been fair, but still, you should get an attorney. Divorce? What do you mean divorce? James, what's this all about? Is this some kind of sick joke? It's no joke. Caroline and I are leaving for California. I have some business to attend to, I replied. Have you lost your mind? We're married. You can't be running off with this woman. Sandy frowned. She's just a friend helping me with my plan, in fact. It took me years to convince her to help me with this, but it will be worth the wait. Now, we have to go. We have a flight to catch. The movers came while we were gone and moved all my stuff to my new place. I've taken half of our cash, and my lawyer will answer any questions you may have. James, please. How can you do this? How can you just leave me? We've had almost 20 years together. Doesn't that mean anything to you? She sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Sandy, it does. I loved you with all my heart for 15 years. I gave you all I had to give, but it just wasn't enough for you. You just had to have your delicious guilty pleasures. Recognition burst onto her face as her hand flew up to her mouth. My diaries! You read my diaries! Oh my God! Oh my God! James, please, it was a mistake. Please, baby, don't do this. Please, I love you. Please, James. I turned to Caroline and nodded, then looked back at my soon-to-be ex-wife. You had your delicious guilty pleasures. Now it's time for me to have my justice. Caroline and I flew to Los Angeles that evening. She'd booked us separate rooms at a hotel near Brad's resort and then helped me prepare for my meeting with him the next day. I wore an expensive suit I'd bought specifically for this occasion and carried a briefcase containing what appeared to be investment documents. Brad Henderson greeted Jason Reynolds warmly at his office, clearly excited by the prospect of a major investor. At 29, he had grown more confident, but no less arrogant. His office was filled with photos of him with celebrities who had stayed at the resort. "Mr. Reynolds, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person," Brad said, extending his hand. "I've prepared some materials about our expansion opportunities." "Call me Jason," I replied with a smile, "and I appreciate your time. But before we discuss business, I always like to get to know my potential partners on a personal level. Tell me about yourself." Over the next hour, Brad bragged about his accomplishments and his connections and hinted at his romantic conquests. As he loosened up, I steered the conversation toward his past. "So you weren't always in the resort business? I understand you worked in real estate back east?" I asked. "Yes, for my father's company. But that was just a stepping stone. I always knew I was destined for bigger things." "Henderson Realty, right? In fact, didn't you work with someone named Sandy Wilson there?" I asked. His smile faltered slightly. "I worked with lots of agents. The name sounds familiar, but..." I leaned forward. "Sandy Miller, actually. Married to James Miller." Brad's face drained of color. "I'm sorry. Who did you say you were again?" "I think you know exactly who I am," I said, my voice steady and cold. I opened my briefcase and pulled out copies of Sandy's diary entries about their affair. "I've been planning this moment for 5 years, Brad. Look, man, I don't know what Sandy told you, but she didn't tell me anything. She wrote it all down, though. Every sordid detail," I replied. Brad stood up, trying to regain his composure. "This is ridiculous. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I will. But first, you should know that I've sent copies of these diary pages to your grandfather, along with a detailed account of your sexual harassment of employees here. I also took the liberty of contacting those 2 women who almost filed lawsuits against you. Turns out, with a little financial incentive, they're now willing to come forward." His face was a mask of panic now. "You can't do this. My grandfather will..." "Disown you? Remove you from the family business?" "Yes, I imagine he will. He's quite traditional, isn't he? Doesn't tolerate scandal." I stood up and straightened my tie. "By the way, I've also sent copies to your father. Seems he suspected something happened between you and Sandy, but could never prove it. That's why he was so eager to ship you off to California." As I turned to leave, Brad lunged at me, but I was prepared. I sidestepped him easily, and he stumbled into his desk. "I wouldn't do that," I warned. "Assault charges would just make your situation worse." I left him there, staring at the copies of the diary pages, his future crumbling around him. 2 days later, I received a call from Caroline, who had been monitoring the situation from our hotel. "It worked," she said. "Brad's been removed from his position. His grandfather announced it this morning. Apparently, there was a huge scene at the family meeting. Brad's been cut off financially until he completes a rehabilitation program." When I returned home, Sandy was waiting for me. She looked terrible, eyes red from crying, hair disheveled. "How could you?" she demanded. "Mr. Henderson called me into his office yesterday. He had copies of my diary. He fired me, James. He said his son had been disowned from the family business because of me." "Not because of you," I corrected. "Because of both of you. Actions have consequences, Sandy. But you've destroyed my career. No one in real estate will hire me now." I shrugged. "Just like you destroyed our marriage. Seems fair to me." Sandy tried to fight the divorce and even denied having an affair with Brad, telling everyone I had just lost my mind and run off with another woman. Fortunately, I had taken the diary with her handwritten confessions, and when I sent photos of it to the kids, they knew she had lied. Despite her attempts to delay it, the divorce eventually went through. By that time, I had moved into my own place, and Caroline had helped me stay focused on my goals. Sandy requested, and I agreed to one final conversation when the final divorce papers were signed. She began apologizing to me, but I raised a hand to stop her. Then I asked her the only question I wanted answered. Why? James, I did it for purely selfish reasons. I was flattered some handsome young man wanted me, and I was positive you'd never find out. I never had any feelings for Brad, except attraction. It was just the whole forbidden fruit thing. He was only the second man I'd ever been with. The cheating was so naughty and so exciting. I was so caught up in my own pleasures, I never thought about the consequences of getting caught and of hurting you. I'm so embarrassed by what I did and so devastated by what it has cost me. I hope someday you will be able to forgive me. Sandy, you gave me 15 good years and 2 great kids. For that I will always love you. The last few years of our marriage were the worst of my entire life, and for that I will always resent you. Given time, I assume I will eventually work out that conflict and maybe be able to forgive you. But don't hold your breath. I stood and walked out of the conference room. I could hear Sandy sobbing as I left. I later learned that Sandy had to sell our house and move into a small apartment. She eventually found work as an office administrator at half her previous salary. As for Brad, his grandfather forced him to work at one of their smallest properties in a remote location, starting at the bottom, cleaning rooms and doing maintenance. According to my sources, he was forbidden from having any management role for at least 5 years. 3 years later, I had built a successful construction management firm of my own. Caroline had become my business partner, and we remained good friends. She had actually introduced me to Jennifer, a kind and honest woman who understood my past and helped me learn to trust again. By the time the kids graduated, I had worked through the pain of Sandy's betrayal, thanks mostly to the new life I had built. Jennifer and I threw a big graduation party for the kids, and Sandy came alone. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the consequences of her actions. She approached me cautiously. "James, I hear you're doing well." "I am," I said. "Very well." "I'm glad." She hesitated. "I've had a lot of time to think about what I did. I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused." I studied her face and saw genuine remorse. The anger I had carried for so long had faded, replaced by something like pity. "I forgive you, Sandy," I said quietly. "Not for you, but for me. I don't want to carry that burden anymore." She burst into tears and rushed away. Jennifer, who had witnessed the exchange, came to my side. "That was kind of you," she said, slipping her arm around my waist. I shrugged. "It's time to move forward. Besides, my life is good now, better than I ever imagined it could be." Jennifer smiled. "So no more thoughts about delicious justice?" I laughed and pulled her close. "The only delicious thoughts I have now are about our future together." Life had come full circle. The pain of betrayal had led me to a place of greater happiness and fulfillment than I had known before. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about finding your own path to joy despite what they've done. But I have to admit, watching Brad and Sandy face the consequences of their choices did make that journey a little sweeter. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.